welcome to the podcast, Monday Morning Detective. I am your host, Gino Scala. This is episode number 35. And continuing in the vein of covering police-related stories, we're going to discuss the Raleigh Police Department, Raleigh, North Carolina, where this occurred last week, where they confronted a suspect by the name of Darryl Tyree Williams. This was back in January 17th. So it's been a couple of weeks, 3 weeks at least. This I'm reading off of Yahoo News by an independent writer named Andrea Blanco, and I will point out many of the omissions that this writer failed to mention in her article. And of course, I believe it to be intentional. So, but we'll get into the details here. Back in January 17th, a couple of officers on what they called proactive patrol, which is these officers find two subjects in a vehicle, and the vehicle was parked in front of a business. You know, it's 1:55 in the morning. The business is long closed. And it was backed into a parking space, and being familiar with the area and the business, they know that vehicle is not associated with that business in any way, shape, or form. They also see, the two patrol officers see a passenger and a driver in the vehicle. This is considered suspicious activity. Something is, there's a reason they're there, and their car didn't break down because they purposely parked there. So, of course, you think the worst of burglary in progress, though they made contact. Once they did, the door was opened of the suspect's vehicle. They smelled an odor of marijuana and alcohol, including on the breath of the passenger, who they made contact with first. They asked him to alight the vehicle, at which time they did a cursory pat down in search of his pockets, search of weapons or anything of that nature. And they found a dollar bill folded in a particular way that indicated drugs. There is a way to fold the dollar bill while hiding drugs inside, and the fold prevents the drug from falling out. So that's what they find. They open the dollar bill, and sure enough, there's cocaine, and the suspect was placed under arrest and handcuffed. Now, this turned out to be Darryl Tyree Williams, who was 32 years old. Mr. Williams put up a fight, did not want to go quietly, did not submit to their arrest. So he began fighting. He was taken to the ground, at which time he continued to fight, was warned about being tased. He did get tased. He broke free and ran, soon fell. The officers got him, grabbed him once again. He continued to fight. He continued to put up a fight, and he was tased a couple more times to subdue him. It was at this point that he told the officers that he had heart problems. It was somewhere between the first and the second, the first tase, then his escape, then his recapture, and prior to his second tase, I believe, is the way it shook out. and he had a second and third tase because he would not stop fighting, stop resisting. So he was tased a total of 3 times. On the third time, he was rendered unconscious and barely breathing. At one point, the officers felt that he had stopped breathing, and they said so on their body cam. The officers went into survival mode and immediately performed first aid and resuscitation, life-saving efforts, and they managed to bring the suspect back to life, who was now breathing on his own, and his heart was pumping on his own. The officers had already radioed assistance, including EMTs or an ambulance, at which time they arrived 4 minutes later, took over CPR efforts, and took the suspect to the hospital, where he died later that night, later that morning. He was alive when he left the scene, and he died later on. So naturally, the neighbors, the neighborhood in which this happened, and the area around Raleigh are calling for the termination and the arrest and conviction of these 2 officers. Now, one thing about this article by Andrea Blanco, she completely dismissed the escape and the resisting arrest. Never mentioned it in the article. That I recall from the initial report. That's what took place. This is the case of someone who was involved in suspicious activity, had used marijuana and or cocaine and alcohol, was at 2 o'clock in the morning backed up to a business, or they have no business being at, no pun intended. It was unlawful. They were trespassing. There were designated signs around the business about being on the property for trespassing. So they were basically in the middle of the commission of a crime. Although it be a misdemeanor, it became a felony when he was found in possession of cocaine. And of course, it became a violent felony once the suspect, Mr. Williams, began resisting arrest, escaping, and fighting the officers. What I find odd is the fact that he claims to have a heart problem after the fact. Apparently, it wasn't a big heart issue to prevent him from doing cocaine, which clearly affects the heart rate immensely. He didn't apparently think much of his heart condition by using marijuana. He did not consider his heart issue when drinking alcohol. He certainly did not consider his heart issue when he first fought the officers and resisted, and then later escaping. It was only after he was captured the second time, which was several yards away from the initial contact. He didn't get very far. But that's when he basically cried uncle and said, okay, hey, I have a heart problem, don't tase me. He had been tased already. He was tased 2 more times, both times because he wasn't cooperative. He was warned. It's on the body cam. He was warned on both occasions prior to being tased, and he was tased. So, officers cannot take the word of someone who claims they have a heart condition. But we're not going to believe it just by them saying, oh, I have a fractured back. Well, if you had a fractured back, you probably wouldn't be fighting me at this point. But I'll worry about that after you're in custody. So, obviously, these officers are going to be investigated, see if there's any wrongdoing. From the initial reports, I see this as, I called it suicide by cop. Obviously, the Darryl Tyree Williams had no intention on being killed or dying on that particular day, but certainly by his actions, he advanced it to the point where he ended up dying. If they were in policy, their particular department's policy regarding multiple use of tasers, and those situations, the warnings, if they said the right thing, it's all recorded. If they're within policy, then in my opinion, they're within the law. And this is just a unfortunate outcome for this particular suspect. If you have a heart issue so dangerous that a fight on the street could result in killing you, or an electrical charge from a taser could result in your death, it's up to you to not do anything that would put you in a position to get tased. And that's not what this person did. So that is it for episode 35. If you have any questions or concerns, comments on this particular video, please don't hesitate to post your questions or comments. And again, at any time, if you'd like to come on Monday Morning Detective and discuss this issue or others, discuss, debate, kick around, whatever, please let us know and we'll make those arrangements. Okay? Enjoy your day. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you at the next podcast.